John Holder, an old sparring partner.
A bit less of the old place.
John, obviously you've been back in the West Indies now for a few weeks, and no doubt you've had an excellent time here in the Caribbean.
I have indeed. It's been great coming back, and I mean, coming back here. This will always be. It'll always have a special place in my heart, Barbados. It's not home. It hasn't been home for a long time, but it's a special place.
And of course, what goes with that is cricket in this country, Barbados, and this region.
Mm-hmm.
Is West Indies cricket now really as bad as the results suggest?
Well, it must over a period. I mean, it hasn't been a flash in the pan. It's been poor for a long time. I mean, the fact that the team has been performing probably poorly over about 15 years, performing poorly. That's got to be a reflection of the standard of cricket in the Caribbean.
And why do you believe the West Indies have stayed in the doldrums for so long?
I feel that, I mean, that's a question I've been asked, and I think that until attitudes change, we're not going to get much better. Look at batting, for example. There seems to be a feeling here that batting is about hitting 4s and 6s. Every ball, you can't play a maiden over, you can't play 2 maiden overs. You've got to be scoring boundaries. I mean, for me, one of the most successful batsmen here in the last 20 years has been Chandler Paul. And Chandler Paul's whole idea is about scoring runs, and the fact that you can't score runs in the pavilion. So he's prepared to bat for long periods of time. But he's not popular among a lot of so-called cricketing experts. He's boring because he's not hitting 4s and 6s, and until our batsmen learn that you can't score runs in the pavilion and that 2 4s and a 6 is not batting, until they learn that our batting is we're not going to do well because we're not making big totals. So as a result of not making big totals, we're not giving the bowlers anything to bowl at either.
All right, so you cited that as one reason why. What other reasons could you say that West Indies have remained in this situation?
Looking at my time here growing up in Barbados, we used to play cricket almost all the time. At every opportunity we played cricket. I've come back to Barbados, it's now 49 years since I left here. And I've come back to Barbados on numerous occasions. And you've seen less and less cricket played. And we used to play at every opportunity. I mean, Andy Roberts talked tonight about playing and playing and playing. And that's something that's lacking. You only hone your skills by constantly playing and playing and practicing. And for me, playing cricket practicing was never a problem, because practicing for me was just playing cricket. And I think that is something which is sadly lacking. The former great South African golfer, Gary Player, apparently someone made some comment when he was in his prime. Someone made the comment that he's lucky, and he said the harder I practice, the luckier I become. You can only improve your skills in playing cricket or any sport by constantly playing and playing and playing.
Well, that is a very true saying, and I have been back in the Caribbean now for some time, John, and I can concur with you in relation to the amount of cricket that you see being played. I'm talking about not organised cricket, impromptu cricket, and I would say there are many factors for that. One of the reasons, I think communities now are a little bit more built up than they used to be. So now there are more roads, more cars, etc., etc. And also there's a reluctance amongst parents to allow their kids to just go out and play freely. So there's a safety angle there. And also the advent of more organised cricket, I think, has had an effect on how West Indies have looked at the game of cricket and how their young players have actually played, because now, as you would know, as a youngster, you had to actually organise your own cricket amongst your group, and you made up the rules, etc., etc. And I think it made for a better cricketer. These days, a young cricketer, he's taken to a club somewhere, his mother carries the kit bag, he's in the car, and it's a totally different situation. The international cricket, what I find, John, international cricket now, the way it has changed, do you believe the ICC has contributed to the continued decline of West Indies cricket?
I don't know.
And the reason I ask that question is, in the advent of the Future Tours program, would you believe, or would you say the Future Tours program has disadvantaged the West Indies?
I think the main problem is that because the standard of cricket here is so poor, it's not attractive any longer, and people want to be going to the stadium which are full, and the respective boards around the country, around the world, they want teams that are going to fill the stadium, and our team doesn't fill the stadium. Our team doesn't fill any stadium. So our cricket is poor, it's unattractive. No one wants to watch it. Even locals here complain that they don't watch it because the standard is poor. So I'm not sure that the Future Tours program, the ICC's Future Tours program, is making a big difference. It's having a big impact.
Well, I believe that the Future Tours program is a disadvantage to countries like the West Indies, Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, and to a lesser degree New Zealand. The reason why I say that is that back in the day, obviously when you and I were active players, in those days when a side played against another team at home, there was more of a profit sharing situation. Now with the Future Tours program, what the Future Tours program has done is it's meant that the home side keeps all the revenue, which is fine, but the way that things have gone in relation to the unattractiveness of West Indies cricket, it means now that India, England, Australia, South Africa, when they have crowds of 60 plus people in their stadiums, and they're keeping the gate receipts and everything else from those tours, that their boards are getting richer and richer. Now when you play in the Caribbean, and the biggest stadium may be 15,000 people, and they're paying in local currency, it does not even pay the food bill for the teams. So I think the West Indies is at a big disadvantage, simply for that reason, because, as you know, an Ashes series, we're having 2 Ashes series within a couple of months. The revenues earned in England, the ECB will benefit, and now Australia will benefit down in Australia.
Massively.
So the West Indies, to me, I think, because of this Future Tours program, has been hugely disadvantaged. And I would say the other teams as well, Zimbabwe and Bangladesh to a lesser extent, and also New Zealand. During the heyday of West Indies cricket, obviously county cricket was an important part of how West Indian cricket is prepared. How important was English county cricket to West Indies' success? It
was massively important. There's a mental toughness you need to have to play county cricket successfully. You're playing cricket sometimes 7 days a week, and you're travelling. And there are times when the last thing you want, especially on a cold day up in Durham, the last thing you want to do as a player is to go up there, especially standing around the field. And just that mental toughness of dealing with the conditions, which can be extremely challenging to say the least when it's cold. And as I said, the repetitiveness of playing day in and day out, to do that successfully, you need to have a lot of mental toughness allied to your ability as a player. You really have to apply yourself, and it strengthens you. It also helps you in terms of technique as well. England is probably the most difficult place to play cricket, because in addition to the climate, obviously because of the climate, the ball quite often swings, it moves off the pitch, and allied to that, the cold and so on. It's a really tough place to play cricket. And if you can play cricket successfully in England, you can play almost anywhere.
So in recent times, because of the lack of good cricketers coming from the Caribbean, West Indian players have been really denied that opportunity to actually play in England and develop that side of the game that you're talking about, which is a very important part. Hence, when we do play in those conditions at the international level, we are always found out.
Struggle.
So, I mean, I believe, and I'm a product of that system and yourself, I certainly believe that playing English county cricket had a serious effect on the success of West Indies teams and West Indian players over that time. John, you've been back here, as I said, for a week or two, and as you know, people are always talking about cricket all the time, and they're always talking about the selectors and the WICB, etc., etc. Do you believe that what you've heard, you feel the WICB have done sufficient to replace the experience that West Indian cricketers would gain by playing in England?
I remember talking to a former West Indian player who played during that successful period, and he reckoned that during the time that the West Indies were successful, the board did nothing. They put nothing in place. They did no promoting of the game down here. They did virtually nothing. They just seemed to sit back and accepted all the plaudits for the success and put nothing in place for when that group of players had gone. And so there's been a massive vacuum as a result of that. Because they said they've put nothing in place at all to try and replace the players as they got to retirement. They just sat back and did nothing. They did no marketing. And in those days, I mean, West Indies boat cricket should have been a lot stronger financially when we had such a fantastically successful side, if the board had done some proper marketing then. Now, since then there has been marketing, but marketing what? You're marketing mediocrity instead of marketing success. So I think the board has been lax in not selling West Indies cricket and at least putting on a proper financial structure for West Indies cricket, which I think where you could have probably then put money into the game, into developing players, but they've done nothing.
Well, I have to agree with you on that, John, because at that point in time when West Indies were a force in world cricket, that was during the period where revenues were shared. And had we had more skillful marketing personnel, we would have been able to negotiate certainly a lot better than we did.
That's right.
And we would have been able to build up reserves that would have stood us in good stead after that. Hence, the arrival of the future tours, where you're no longer in a position to negotiate. And so it backs up exactly what you have said in relation to what the West Indies Cricket Board have done. What I would say, what can the West Indies Cricket Board do first of all, to stop the decline, and then to improve West Indies cricket?
I mean, that's for you really, because you're down here very much involved with the coach. I mean, one of the unfortunate things that I've heard recently is that in the future, in the 50-year tournament that's going to be played sometime next year, and that they've dropped out the CCC from the competition and brought in America and Ireland. I mean, the West Indies board is supposed to be helping to develop cricketers in this region, and the more cricketers from this region that play at the highest level, the more chance there is of finding up and coming talent. But if you dropped out one of the key and one of the quite successful teams, then you're trying to help develop American cricket or Irish cricket. It seems that's what's happening. The more cricketers from this region who play at the regional level, the more chance there is of us finding talent, or the West Indies board finding talent to play for the West Indies. But we're denying youngsters the opportunity to play. That can't be good for the future of West Indies cricket.
But it was very much, in my belief, financial and a business arrangement, because the CCC actually got to the final of the competition last year. So they could not perform that badly, and I believe it is a backward step that they're taking. But they are charged with running cricket in the region, and also they're also charged with developing cricket in places like USA, because USA comes on the West Indies. So I can also understand that there is a need for them to try and develop the game in the USA as well.
But I don't see why they should. The West Indies Cricket Board should be looking after West Indies cricket. The ICC should be setting up somebody to look after cricket in the United States. To me, that's a complete nonsense. I don't have a problem with the occasional match with the USA, but why the West Indies should be trying to develop cricket in the United States beats me. That's the ICC's job.
Well, the ICC have actually given USA to the West Indies, as like in Australia have other parts of Asia that comes under the Australian Cricket Board. So you can imagine the thinking of the West Indies Cricket Board, that if they're able to develop the game and a passion for the game in the USA, that it can be a good revenue earner in the future. So I would imagine that that's one of the areas that they're looking at while they're having America involved in the competition. Can West Indies be a dominant force of world cricket again?
Certainly not in my lifetime, I don't think. I think it'll require a miracle for the way how things have gone in the last 15 years. It would require a miracle for that to happen, and I can't see that happening. I really can't see that happening. Only if the standard cricket in this region improves significantly. There's got to be, the standard cricket has got to improve significantly for us to become a force in world cricket. And the way how things are going, it seems to be going the other way.
I mean, what sort of things would they have to do in order to bring about that that revolution?
I think first of all, batsmen need to learn to bat for long periods. Players just need to work on their skills a lot more than they're doing at present. The feeling I get from I mean, I don't live down here, but the feeling I get from listening to people who live down here is that people don't spend enough time playing the game. Andy Roberts made that comment tonight. The fellas don't play enough cricket, and you only develop by playing and playing and playing. I mean, the another golfer, Vijay Singh, apparently he just practices and practices and practices, and this is what fellas need. We just need fellas out there playing and working on specific skills. Apparently, when Eric Cantona first went from Leeds to Manchester United, great footballer. And after the first few practice sessions, he would then ask Alex Ferguson, the coach, for one player just to practice skills. So after doing all your teamwork and so on, he practices all your set pieces and so on. Cantona just went away with the player and just worked on developing skills. And then that became part and parcel of the Manchester United's training thing. We need people, we need things like that here.
Right. John, in your other life, I know you had apart from playing, your other passion was obviously, and career, was umpiring. And in recent times, a certain system has come onto various criticisms, the DRS system. With the emergence of the DRS, do you think neutral test match umpires are still a necessity?
There's never been really a need for neutral umpires. The reality of umpiring is that an umpire is supposed to be neutral. Any umpire worth his salt, or no umpire worth his salt, will start making decisions based on likes and dislikes. The most important thing to you as an umpire, to me as an umpire, was my reputation. And whereas I will make mistakes, they're mistakes of judgment, they're genuine mistakes. I would never ever make a decision based on liking someone or disliking them. So this talk about neutral umpires, in my opinion, is a nonsense. And with the level of TV scrutiny, television scrutiny now, if you start making decisions based on bias, for or against, your reputation will be blown out of the water. Because I did my last test match in 2001, Australia at Lord's. There were 28 cameras on the ground. And every decision I made potentially could be scrutinized, analyzed, and possibly criticized. You can't start making decisions based on likes and dislikes. So for me, there's never really been any need for neutral umpires. You want the best umpires. And if you are good at your job, it doesn't matter who you're umpiring, you'll make your decisions for the right reason. I've never been an advocate of neutral umpires.
Do you believe in the DRS system?
No, not the way how it's been applied. I worked for the ICC until the end of 2010. I was down here in 2009 when England on tour, and at the end of the series, and that's when DRS was in its trial period. And at the end of the tour, we all the umpires who took part in the series down here, the England series, all the umpires, the match referees, we were all asked for our opinion on how DRS should be applied. And my opinion was that the umpires should be the ones who should be able to ask the third umpire. No, the reality of umpiring is that there are times out there in the middle when the ball goes down and there's an appeal, and you haven't got a clue if it's hit anything or what it's hit. I had, in that last test match, when I had a monumental bit of luck, Australia batting and in first innings, and Andy Caddick came on to bowl at my end, at the Pavilion and at Lord's, and he bowled the ball to Michael Slater, which bounced awkwardly. And Slater fenced at it. The ball went through to Alex Stewart, who caught it and threw it in the air, and Slater put the bat in his arm and walked off the field. From where I was, there was no noise, there was no deflection. It must be the thinnest of edges, and Slats walked off the field. At the end of the overs, I walked squarely. I looked up to the heavens and said, thank God. Now, in a situation like that, in my opinion, I should be able to ask the third umpire if the batsman stood his ground. I should be able to ask the third umpire, please review that and tell me what it's hit, if it's hit anything. I feel that the ICC, and between the ICC and the television companies, they're like the drama of the review of the challenge. So the umpire makes the decision, and the players, either the two batsmen at the crease or the captain of the field side, having chatted with his players, all of a sudden there's this thing, and there's a bit of drama, there's a little bit of tension building before they decide to go for the review or not. And I think it's a nonsense. I really think it's a nonsense. The umpire should be able to ask the third umpire, what did it hit? Did it hit anything?
Do you think the DRS system now has allowed batsmen the opportunity not to walk?
Not to walk?
Because you just gave an example of Michael Slater walking when you as an umpire was not sure that he hit it.
Well, I couldn't have given it.
And as you said, you could not have given it. But what I see now with the DRS is that everybody waits. And I just want to know if you feel that as a result of that system now, that there are very few players left who are prepared to go when there is a thin edge.
Well, I mean, but then if you know that you hit the ball with the DRS, and there's every chance that that if you stand, you're going to get given out. What I would like, for me, cricket is a game that's played by human beings, and it's umpired by human beings. I think a lot of the humanness of the game is being eroded by all the use of technology. I really do. And the expert commentators, who quite often I've got no time for them, because having watched, when there's an appeal, they very seldom make a comment until they've watched 2 or 3 replays. Now, there have been some instances in the past of a commentator making a comment after, with the almost supporting the umpire's decision. So the umpire's given somebody out, and I'll give you an example of that. When Botham first started commentating for Sky, there was a Benson and Hedges game between Gloucestershire and Surrey, which was on television, and Ben Hollyoak bowling to a little fella called Matthew Windows, and Ben bowled from wide of the crease, and Matthew was a little fella like to cut and pull, and Ben bowled the ball outside the off stump, short delivery, and Matthew got back to cut it backward and square, and the ball hit his pad, then hit the bat, and Graham Burgess gave him out LBW. And Ian Botham, without waiting for a replay, said, "Great decision, pad bat." Great decision, he said. But when they showed the replay, the ball hit windows marginally outside the line of the off stump, which meant as he's playing a shot, he should have been given up. Now, you can't eat your cake and have it. You can't say on the one hand when you saw it that the umpires saw it that it was a great decision, and then no, because you had the benefit of replay, it's a rubbish decision. You got to be consistent. And so I have no time whatsoever for the commentators. It's easy to having the benefit of all these cameras and super slow motion, etc., and pontificating when, I mean, Bob Willis, I think, is one of the worst of all time. And he just likes to pillory umpires. Oh, that was a shocking decision. But they only make the comment after watching a couple of replays, and it's easy. I like to see the RS done away with, as Flintoff said. I like to see it done away with, and cricket just goes back to being played by players and umpires making decisions and players getting on with it.
So you feel the stance that India has been taking on this issue is warranted, and they should continue?
Yes.
In that?
Yes, absolutely.
Another fairly recent part of this game, John, has been the whole question of match fixing. And to the extent now where we're seeing on a regular basis that players in this high-profile game are getting themselves into trouble. I can remember during my cricket career, I guess I was fairly naive and not having any idea as to any sort of fixing or betting on the game of cricket. And I would just relate to you an incident to show just how naive I was. And I remember a game at Lord's, Middlesex was playing, and it was probably about 10 minutes before lunch. And all of a sudden, at the nursery end, people will be standing on the back of the stand by the side screen, thereby holding up player. And to me, as the naive cricketer I was, that it was just somebody decided to leave this in and walk in front of the side screen at the wrong time. Until a member on my team pointed out to me, have you got any idea what is going on up there? And I said, well, I believe the guy doesn't understand cricket, he's here. He's just got up at the wrong time and he keeps... And it was made known to me that these persons would have betted on the game, and they may have betted that by lunchtime there would be a certain number of runs scored or a certain number of overs bowled. And in order for this to come true, they would get up and walk up and down in front of the side screen, thereby delaying the player. So right back then, I was very naive and did not understand what was going on. But clearly, from that time, there were things taking place. I mean, you spoke recently, John, about being approached.
Yeah, I got approached.
To manipulate a game in Sharjah back in, I think, 93.
93.
This was widely reported internationally. Has the ICC Anti-Corruption Unit ever spoken to you about it?
I actually, while I was working for ICC, I actually spoke to one of their anti-corruption officers in Dubai. But as far as I know, nothing happened. I gave him the name of the chap who approached me, the chap called Mohammed Kolia, who was a Pakistani who lived in Singapore. And he told me he was head of this syndicate, and they were involved in shipping gold bullion and betting on the results of matches. He said that every year between India, Pakistan and the UAE, tens of millions of black market dollars circulate. And that if in the West Indies, Pakistan and Sri Lanka were playing this tournament, and West Indies were dominant, they were winning everything. And 2 matches before the final, Sri Lanka nearly beat Pakistan. And this same evening, after that game, I was introduced to this gentleman who said he was head of this syndicate. And he said to me that if Sri Lanka had won that game, that his syndicate would have lost $1 million US. Next day was going to be the last of the round-robin matches before the final, which was going to be between Pakistan, between West Indies and Sri Lanka. And because the West Indies were so dominant, you weren't going to get any decent odds. And if I could somehow ensure that the two Sri Lankan openers put on 85, they'll pay me £10,000 cash. I just said to him, you got the wrong person. And the reality is that people who get approached and people who accept the money, they think it's easy money. There's no such thing as easy money. The only easy money is if you go and put £1 on the lottery and you win £10 million. That doesn't happen very often. And once you say yes, you're trapped. You're trapped because the people who pay the money, they have records of who they paid, how much they paid, and when they paid, and almost inevitably, you're going to get exposed. The Hansi Cronies. I had a chat with Alan Donald about Cronia. I asked him at Lords, a game between Middlesex and Warwickshire at Lords in 2000. I said to him, what was the story with Cronia? He said Cronia is always like money, and that they trapped him by initially giving him little inducements, which became bigger and bigger and more valuable, and in the end he was in a situation where he couldn't say no. But they thought it's easy money. There's no such thing as easy money. The young boy from Essex,
Westfield.
Westfield, he thought it was easy money. Apparently Danish Canaria encouraged him to bowl this rubbish, bowl the bat over. He's going to get about £60,000. Easy money. There's no such thing as easy money. And you have to say to these people, no. Because the reality is that you'll get exposed and everything that you work for is forgotten. John Holt is no longer, he wasn't a good umpire, he was a match fit, he was a cheat. So you've got to live with that, your family's got to live with it. And all your friends, oh, your friend is a cheat, oh, your dad is a cheat. If you can live with that sort of thing hanging over you, then you'll take the money. If you can't, you tell them no.
Do you think the ICC will ever be able to eradicate this problem?
No. It is humanly impossible to police every cricketer wherever he goes throughout his life. And at some stage, you could be walking down the street and someone come and approach you. They know who you are, they come and approach you. So it's impossible. What I see and what the boards around the world can do is try and educate the players. That's what you have to do. You can't watch police somebody 24 hours a day. And
you certainly can't stop betting, because
absolutely
betting is very much a part of life on all sports. So I think the ICC have got themselves a pretty tough.
But it's not just the ICC; it's all the national boards. All the national boards have got to buy into this, and are going to talk to the players about the pitfalls of accepting what was regarded as easy money. There's no such thing.
John, we'll just switch now to a little bit of cricket. Still being an umpire, as you are, or a practicing umpire, this week you would have seen the test matches between India and the West Indies. And apart from the wonderful cricket that we saw played by India, both Shane Shinnerfoot and Marlon Samuels were reported for illegal bowling actions. I mean, how do you feel about this 15-degree allowance for the extension of the bowling arm?
The reality of this thing is, the reality is that a survey was done by the University of Western Australia on bowling actions, and no bowler bowls with an entirely straight arm. There's a certain degree of flexion in every bowler's action. The bowling arm, there's a certain amount of bending in every bowler's action. But the scientists have worked out that that at 15 degrees you can actually detect it. So that is the benchmark now. So anything more than 15 degrees is illegal. I mean, I remember years ago we had an umpire called Arthur Jepson, who you would have known, and I was at Taunton umpiring with Arthur, and Roy Marshall, the former Barbados great player, Hampshire player, he was on the committee at Somerset, and he said they both agreed that every bowler bowls with a certain amount of bend in his elbow. It is a matter of how much you allow, and the limit has been set at 15 degrees. And clearly, especially watching Shillingford, like someone throwing darts. It looks like someone throwing darts, quite honestly.
which is a great shame because Shillingford was certainly the standout West Indian bowler in India, and really was looking, especially with the returns he's had the last 4 or 5 test matches. I think he's taken 5 consecutive 5-wicket hauls. He was looking the one genuine spinner that West Indies have been able to produce for a long time.
The one genuinely good bowler as well.
Which is a great shame. John, you mentioned elsewhere that you were removed from the TCCB's list of test match umpires in 1991. This has been misrepresented on a number of times. What actually did happen?
England West Indies 1991, last test at the Oval. West Indies went into the final test leading 2-1. England batted first and racked up quite a big score, could have been somewhere in excess of 400. And West Indies batting on the Saturday just before lunch, about between 20 to 1 and quarter to 1, I was at the Vauxhall Inn at Square Leg, and I saw a bowler walking back to his mark from standing at the bowling at the opposite end, and his body language suggested to me that he was doing something untoward to the ball, and I could see both his elbows working. Now, you don't polish a ball with holding in both your hands. You polish the ball holding it in one hand. But both his elbows were working, which suggested he was doing something to the ball. So I had big Sir Lawrence bowling at my end. So at the end of an over from Sid, the last ball went through to Alex Stewart. And I said, "Stewie, can I have the ball, please?" So he caught it and threw it to me. And I looked at the ball and I swore under my breath, because the non-shiny side of this ball had about a dozen big gouge marks. I mean, when you scratch a ball, especially when you use a thumbnail, it makes a very distinctive mark which you can't reverse. And I swore under my breath, so Merv Kitchen, my colleague, as he walked in, I said, "Merv, what do you think of this ball?" And Merv said to me, "It's been scratched." And the mistake that I made now with the benefit of hindsight is that once he confirmed that the ball had been scratched, we should change the ball there and then for the whole world to see. But I thought it's only just started and I didn't want to make a big scene, so I called the England captain, Graham Gooch, and I showed him the ball and I said, "Skipper, this is illegal and it must stop right now." And Gooch could not say a word because the ball was there in front of his eyes with the big telltale gouge marks. Anyhow, we went to lunch, and we came back after lunch, and some of the young England players were making flippant comments about some silly person had been tampering, some naughty person had been tampering with the ball. Anyhow, for the rest of the match, I would check the ball at intervals and it stopped. And I had an outstanding test match. Now, at the end of every match, we had 2 reports to submit to the board. One is a pitch report, like an A4 size, something like this, and a match report. So the pitch report literally deals with the pitch, how it looks, the covering of grass, etc., etc. And the match report has various columns. And on the top column, which dealt with breaches of the laws and playing regulations, I wrote on this thing that the England players on the Saturday morning had scratched the ball. And that report went into the TCCB, and that was confidential. About a month after the season had ended, I got a letter from my then boss, a fellow called Tony Brown, played for Gloucester, the captain of Gloucestershire, saying to me that I was removed from the test panel. And I was obviously devastated, especially knowing that I'd had a good test match. And then, when the test panel was announced for the following year, 1992, and I wasn't on it, there was a lot of surprise in the media, because I was seen then as one of the best umpires in the country, not in the world. And they were surprised, because having been to Pakistan, having had a good relationship with the Pakistanis, they were surprised that with Pakistan touring the following year, 1992, that I wasn't on the test panel. So there was a little bit of digging done. And Jack Bannister, the former Warwickshire seam bowler, who was also a TV commentator, he did some digging and he found out about the ball tampering. In fact, he said that he was actually commentating at the time with Ray Illingworth. when I come from the gooch with this ball. So he did some digging and found out about the ball tampering, and he wrote a book called Jack in the Box, which came out before the start of the 1992 season. So in it, he made reference to this ball tampering incident, and it was previewed in the Daily Express by a fellow called Bateman, and Bateman's made emphasis. He stressed this incident with the ball tampering, and when the people at Lord's, A.C. Smith and company, and Tony Brown and Alan and Tim Lamb, when they saw this article in the newspaper, they went ballistic and denied publicly that there was any ball tampering or that it was reported. And that is a monumental lie, because I would challenge the board. I would, in a court of law, if you are saying there was no ball tampering, produce my report. My report stated quite clearly there was ball tampering, but there was a big cover-up. There was just a big cover-up, and I got penalized for doing my job properly. So for 10 years I didn't umpire a test match, which cost me about between maybe 30 test matches. I should probably have done between 40 and 50 test matches. I did 11.
Yes, that was a very unfortunate situation. John, we can't finish but talking about, you also this last week, you would have seen the retirement of the great Sachin Tendulkar. And you umpired his first test match, and you also umpired his first test century, which was at Old Trafford in 1990.
And I was at the bowler's end when he smacked the ball through mid-off for 4 to reach his 100.
To reach his 100. Where do you rank Tendulkar in terms of being one of the all-time great batsmen?
He must be up there. He must be up there with as one of the best players the world has ever known. I mean, you don't score how many runs, how many thousands? Over 15,000 runs, over 100 centuries in all forms of the game. You don't score those sort of runs over 20, and it's a longevity. Having been successful over such a long period of time, that's a measure of true greatness. So he's one of the icons of the game.
Well, his record certainly suggests that he is one of the all-time, if not the all-time great batsman. But for me, he was not only a great batsman, but you can see that he was a great human being.
Absolutely.
He conducted himself in an immaculate way, and it was fitting the way that India actually sent him off into retirement. I stayed up the third night to see the end of the game and the actual send-off. And here was a country honouring a great sports person for what it's done over the years. Sadly, that has not been the case here in the Caribbean, John. We tend to, in many cases, humiliate our heroes by dropping them, etc., etc. And it was just fitting to see that what Tendulkar did for India was recognised by the people of India, and they gave him right to the end a very fitting send-off. I mean, did you get a chance to see what happened in that test?
No, I didn't. But I think maybe one of the problems in the Caribbean is that people get a little bit envious when you've been successful. And instead of celebrating the fact that you've had a great career, you made a massive contribution to West Indies and international cricket, there seems to be, by the board, some sort of envy that you've been successful. And that's really, I think that's a problem here in the Caribbean. I really do. And as you said, Tendulkar it's not just what he's done on the field. It's the way how he's done it, but it's the way how he's conducted himself. He's just a lovely, lovely young man. So he's a gentleman.
I mean, at the end of the game, when the presentations was taking place, and then Tendulkar, it's one of the longest presentations that I have ever seen. But you couldn't help being moved by the presentation, and particularly when Tendulkar gave his presentation, and Tendulkar went back to thank and name the persons from the time he was about 11 years of age right through his career who have been with him all the way to this time. And I thought here was a superstar, not just in the sense of a normal world superstar, but in India he's
like a god.
He's like a god, certainly to the Indian public. And here was this man paying tribute to all the persons who had helped him along this journey, and I thought it was a very moving ceremony. And it really epitomized for me what Sachin Tendulkar was always about. Great batsman, but I think also a great human being. John, I know I've kept you up late tonight.
I just want to add something to that comment on Tendulkar. What he failed to tell you was that first match he played against Pakistan, his debut match in Karachi, on the greenest, hardest pitch I've ever seen. It was tailor-made for Wasim, Waqar, Imran, etc. And Pakistan won. It was made deliberately because when Srikanth called wrongly, and Pakistan had won the toss, the groundsman almost started doing flips, somersaults. He was so happy. And Tendulkar, having scored hundreds of runs in the Ranji Trophy, I think they struggled to get him out. All of a sudden, he's gone to higher level to play against some of the best on really seam bowler-friendly conditions, and he struggled. I mean, Waqar bowled from my end, the far end at Karachi, with the speed of light, and he struggled. He got to about 14, and he thrashed around and got out. And when India came to field, I was standing at square leg at one stage when he was feeling next to me. He was just feeling forward square, and I said to him, Sachin, playing at this level, you're playing against the best. You just need to be a little bit more. Take your time, because you could tell he was nervous, and he was out of his depth and the speed of the bowling and the aggression. I said, just take your time. I said, you're playing against the best in the world. You're not going to get so many bad balls. You just need to take time. So he failed to say that at his resignation.
What he did actually do was take note of that, because his entire career was one of taking his time and be very patient. Yeah. And no, he was a great player. I think it'd be sad to see him gone from the field of play, but no doubt he would be not a loss to Indian cricket. John, when you travel back in a few days, you have a safe trip back to England, and I'm sure that at some time in the future we will be able to chat a little bit more about what's going on.
Hot paths will cross again.
In West Indies cricket.
Thanks much.